scroll through here. So
be willing, you can always say pass, but would you start by just reading off one of those and then just go around as loud as you can? You just as loud as you can, if you can read it.
Okay. I have the right to be kept safe and informed at the time of my parents' arrest.
I have the right to be heard when discussions are made about me.
Okay.
I have the right to be considered when decisions are made about my parents.
I have the right to be well cared for in my parents' absence.
I have the right to speak with, see, and touch my parents.
I have the right to support as I face my parents incarceration.
the right not to be judged, blamed, or labeled. Too far away.
Because my parent is incarcerated.
I have the right to a lifelong relationship with my parent.
So knowing what you know in the realm that you work, how are we doing? Okay. This is certainly not legally binding. This was a call to action from about, I want to say even 10 years ago in San Francisco, where folks got together and were really looking at this issue. And so this is the voice of, obviously the voice of children. It was put together by judges, counselors, you know, parents. So a lot of different people came together and said, you know what, ultimately, these are the rights that we want to provide for children when there's somebody that's incarcerated. So welcome. You can come in, Bree. I'm Julie Christensen, and this is Barry Jones, and we are going to present something that has been, I guess I could say that this was started in, well, really the roots of this project began in 2005. I was at the Montana Women's Prison in the parenting program for 4 years, and in that capacity, you get to work a lot with the moms and their children and their caregivers and the counselors and the teachers and the community at large. And you really get to understand that this is a huge issue. And when women are getting ready to leave, and men too, it's just the history was more around the women that were incarcerated. But when the parents get ready to leave, I was noticing that, especially in our community, that's the only one I can speak toward, there really wasn't like a bridge, like some sort of assistance of how do you reintegrate back into the family. You know, you can find addiction groups, you can find self-helps usually, and I'm not saying that they're all over and that they're, you know, they have everything they need, but this was a particular area where there just wasn't a lot of assistance. And so I started putting together this group as part of a master's program in Bozeman. And I got a lot of input from other people, particularly women that I had a chance to maintain contact with and their families. So this is not just what I thought was good. This was a collaborative effort about putting this project together. And it has grown and grown and grown, as we will talk about. So, do you want to give them a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so I was incarcerated for almost 9 years. And I basically missed the first 9 years of my daughter's life. And so I knew when I got out, I got to the pre-release, and my case manager could see that I was struggling trying to be able to form a relationship with my daughter. And so he called around town and tried to, there's lots of parenting programs, but one geared towards a parent who's trying to enter back into his child's life and the caregiver's life and how to do that in the most healthy way. It didn't exist. And so he eventually contacted Julie, and Julie said that she had started this program and they were going to do their first all-men group. And so I signed up for that, and that's how and I went through the program, and I'll talk more about what I got from it, but it helped me find a healthy way to re-enter my daughter's life. And since then, she called me and asked me to sit on the committee and then to give these presentations. And I'm really behind the whole thing. I figure that if I help one child, one parent, and one caregiver come together, for the welfare of the child, just one, through this whole thing, it's worth it to me, you know, because we're trying to ultimately break the cycle, you know, and that's why I'm involved still. And I recently sat through an 8-week program as kind of like a, I don't know, not a mentor, but a sit-in, and I took it 3 years ago or something like that. But it's totally powerful, and she'll get more into it. But it's not a mandated thing, so we don't want to make it mandated. The program is small, like the number, so there's like, what, 9?
8 to 10, kind of 8 to 10.
8 to 10, and we'll talk more about it later, but that's kind of how I became involved.
You can check off the list of I want to give back because he has tenfold. I mean, it's amazing. He rises to the occasion every time. So we've done this together. So we're pretty good at presenting what we want to present. So at the core, this project is an 8-session group. Okay, that's really how it started. So we do 8 sessions. Not that long into it, with the first group that went through it was a group of women, and we said, well, what'd you get out of it, and what do you really want to maintain? One of the things they said is, do not make this mandated. Do not make this required. Do not write this into our case plan. We've got enough of that. And so they said loud and clear, let this be a voluntary thing. So we listened to that, and also though, passages and alternatives or I guess I should say passages in alpha, have made this eligible for self-help. So for those folks that do have to have the self-help requirements, this is something that they can use for self-help. So what happened though after the group got going is we really understood that there's way more to this. There's conversations between the parents and the caregivers. There's the voice of the children. That's why originally it was called Parenting After Incarceration. We not long after that changed it to Voices of Incarceration because there are many voices in this picture that we need to be listening to. So that's really the work that we're trying to do. But we'll explain more as we go. No idea what. There we go. Maybe I just don't know how to work this. Okay.
2.2 million people are in prison or jail each year. 638,000 men and women are released annually. National recidivism rate is 43.3%. And it's actually in the federal system. We gave a presentation to the U.S. Probation Office. And they said that there was 54% was the recidivism rate for the federal probation office here in Billings, Montana.
There's been a decrease in crime rates, but we still are #1 in incarceration. Nearly 2 million children have a parent in prison with no systematic way to track that. Why don't we know? Anybody want to take a guess? Why don't we know how many children are impacted?
Nobody's checked to see.
Maybe because we don't know. What did you say, Stephanie?
Nobody's taken the time to actually get those numbers, probably.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no way. I think when they become incarcerated, I'm not sure that there's a systematic way to track, again, children that are.
Unless they're asking them upon intake or something.
A lot of times we're just not asking.
Yeah.
Women are being incarcerated at a growth rate. So there's still more men that are incarcerated, but women's numbers are double, at twice as fast as men. And a significant portion, really, even though it's not coming out, believe me, a significant portion, I don't know if this is working.
Maybe I'm standing in the way.
I don't think so.
Just use the keyboard.
Maybe the battery?
There it goes.
Oh. Uh-oh. Well, anyway, the last piece of that was a significant portion are mothers and fathers. Okay.
In Billings, Alternatives Incorporated has 1,000 men and women in treatment and pre-release programs. The Montana Women's Prison currently houses, it's actually over 200 women, pretty sure. And
Somebody said it's like 220 or something right now.
it's more than it was intended to. Yosemite County Detention Facility has over 500 and they're building onto it. And I think it was only designed for 250 originally or something like that.
Yeah.
Of these men and women, a significant portion are mothers and
That's why it
fathers.
wasn't working. All right. Here are the goals of VIP. It's to increase the self-worth of the parents and the children. It's to improve communication between parent and child, but also parent and caregiver, parent and teacher, parent and, and to rebuild trust, which is the biggest hurdle to overcome. And it's to empower adults to advocate for themselves and family. If they've never been in a role where they knew how to advocate, and we want them to advocate, that's a little bit tricky. So, and of course, we all want the rates to go down and stronger families, and we want to break the cycle, so to speak. So there's 2 core beliefs. You want to talk on that one, and I'll talk on the other one?
I'll read it. You can
Okay.
talk on the psychology behind it. Collective awareness. We cannot expand our empathy if we are not challenged to do so. Therefore, learning takes place on both sides of the table of VIP. Actually, I can talk to this.
Okay.
So basically, it's an 8-week program, and you sit down. They have sponsors. You'll see who the sponsors are, but they are nice restaurants in town that sponsor it. They basically cater. Sometimes they're actually wearing their little uniform and they actually service, and other times we just go through the line. But it brings an atmosphere. When you sit down to break bread with someone, it brings a different kind of atmosphere. And so you have psychologists, you have school counselors, who else? And these people are sitting down at the table, and we're both learning. There's psychologists and school counselors that have learned a lot about parents that have been incarcerated from what we talk about. The children, she has children that come in that were affected by incarceration.
Older, that were younger when they...
Yeah, but they give their perspective of their parent being incarcerated. And then they ask us questions, so it really brings an atmosphere of everybody at the table is getting, is learning something about this. Is there anything else that you want to?
No, that's exactly, yep. Just to piggyback off that, like you said, when you have like school officials come in, principals and whatever, it's really interesting, again, how the conversation is going back and forth and how both are really learning about this issue and each other's perspective. So it speaks to the second one, which is one-to-one relationships. We know that we are motivated. Most everything that we do is motivated in some way by a relationship. Would you agree? You probably went to work today because you're supporting yourself, but you're also supporting somebody else, and you hear about those that you're working with, and so it's a lot of it is obviously it's relationship. So that's what we want to do. Is the goal is at the end of the 8 weeks that they leave knowing, gosh, at least a dozen or more people that they interacted with during their time in the group that were healthy connections that they have. So.
Healthy expectations for reunification. Now, I've seen this not just with myself, but other people. You'd be surprised when you're sitting and you're incarcerated for years on end, how you dream about what it's going to be like when you're released. With your children, with the caregivers, with your own family. And what you find out when you get out is that it doesn't end up being like what you expect. So it talks about healthy reunification. I've talked to countless guys where they just think they're just going to go in and essentially assume the role of a parent when someone else has been assuming that role for years. And when they find out that that's not actually going to take place, and so for me, it's huge because we basically go over, what is healthy? What's in the best interest of your son or daughter or all your kids? And a lot of times it's not to go in and, get your own place and have them move in, and it's good to have, this was huge for me, to be able to understand what's in my daughter's best interest.
Yeah, so as he was saying, So I should say, in the group, there's no handout. Well, sometimes there's a handout, but there's not a workbook. We do have a journal and we give them, some processing assignments when that week is over. But there's a lot of experiential stuff. So, for example, on that night that you're talking about, they'll get flip charts and we have them over on the walls where the very first thing that they're asked to do is draw a picture of what you see in a year or 2 years. And then the next one is they do a big target. And then we talk about all the roles of a parent, and we kind of brainstorm, what are the roles? Well, you have to be, an educator, you sometimes have to be a nurse.
Consistent.
Sometimes you have to be a disciplinary, what's that?
Consistent.
Consistent. But we talk about all those roles, and sometimes we come up with 10 or 12, and then they have to plot them on their target as to how confident they are. So 0 would be, I feel 100%. Sorry, 100% would be, I feel really, really confident in that role, and on the outside it's 0. Oh my gosh, I have no idea how to do this. And they get to plot, and it's not to, deflate them night one, but it's to really look at, these are the roles, so okay guys, this is what we're working towards. So it's just that initial picture of what they have in their mind. When we do the intake for the project, for the groups, I always say this group will be challenging. We don't just come together and eat really good food, although that's part of it. But it will be challenging. The goal is not, I never want anybody to feel judged. Challenged is a lot different. And we even talk about what is that like? So there's a lot of group ownership in this, so we'll discuss that at the beginning. Night 2, we talk about facing the stigma. And I think we all carry a degree of stigma from our childhoods or whatever. But the stigma coming out of incarceration, I'm learning, is so powerful, the labels that they walk around in. And so we do, again, another activity where, I won't give the whole activity away, but basically they have to identify it, name it, wear it, before we can process through it that night. So that one is really difficult. We don't have any guests the first 2 weeks because we're trying to build relationships among us. So that one is pretty powerful.
It's totally powerful. And I'll just say that when you put little badges on yourself of the stigmas that you associate with yourself, and a lot of times society doesn't even have them, or they might, but it's only a select group of the society. But wearing them, it was totally powerful for me. And as a parent, you feel like you've made mistakes anyway. If you guys are parents, especially when they're older, you're like, am I the reason why they didn't go to college or they didn't graduate or any of that kind of stuff? Well, when you've been incarcerated for a number of years or even a small period of time, you can't help but blame any problems that they have on yourself, and trying to grow from that and find some healthy way.
I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to pop all these out. That way we have time. We don't run out of time for that other stuff. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Like changing the game. Anyway, as you can see, this is the 8 sessions lined out. So I will just say that night 3 is where we offer the voice of the caregiver. So we will have some caregivers come in. It's usually not the caregiver to one of the people in the room. Does that make sense? So there's some distance there. And then the 4th week, it's the children. So we'll have a couple of youth come in. Oh my goodness. And just so you know, we do this really carefully. I don't just like, hey, what do you think? We do a lot of talking to the parent, the caregiver, and as the child, is this something that they really want to do? And of the small handful that we have, they capture the room. I mean, they can move the room to tears with just telling their story.
They typically do.
Yeah, it's amazing. They'll remember the smells of when their parent was arrested, what they were eating, what was on TV. I mean, those were things that stick in their mind.
What they faced at school when their parent was incarcerated.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have a little bit more of the voice of the children later on in the presentation. And then reparative experiences. This is when we'll have a professional in the community come in who's got therapy in their background and working with families, and we'll talk about what does starting to repair relationships look like. What are some things that are important? The 7th, the 8th session, we'll do a resource scavenger hunt. So it's kind of fun. Well, I was looking at that candy up there. That's what we do, is we throw a lot of candy around the room that night. But we have like real life scenarios that they might face. Like when I went to jail, I lost all the birth certificates. How do I get birth certificates back? How do I get, where do I get my kids' preschool screened? I have no idea. What age? What do I do if I don't feel like I'm in a healthy relationship? Where can I go in the community? So we throw out real life situations. And the cool thing is at that point, we've started to bring professionals in the room. So on that night in particular, let's say I have 6 group members. They will have an advocate. They will each have their own advocate. So I make a lot of phone calls. I know Kathy in the back room, she's come for this as well. But I'll pick from any advocacy agency that's willing to have somebody come. So Head Start has sent advocates, HRDC, Pluck, would love to have somebody from the center come, and so everybody has their own advocate on that night. So it's kind of fun. And we try to get some laptops together, and our internet's always awful, and it's the normal stuff. But they get to, and heck, the laptops aren't even useful because everybody's got phones.
Yeah, and
but
there's some parents that have never really used the internet, and that would be
Right.
their first experience.
Right.
Because they've been gone for so long.
Yeah, and then at the end of the night, they get Jake's Downtown. They sponsor us in that they give us the accordion files, so every parent gets one. And we talk about, if that was your life, what should be in this file? And so we'll talk about that. So facing preschool and school environments, you want to just briefly touch on that? Because that one was,
I don't know if I can do it briefly.
well, do your best.
So I knew education was important, and I wanted my daughter to know that it was important to me. But the shame and the guilt of going to the school and facing any of that. And so we're sitting down, and there is a counselor from one of the schools. I'm not sure which school she's a counselor at, but she knows the counselor at my daughter's school. And she knows her first name, and she's like, I'll even help you call her if you want to. And so it started that action where I could get involved in the school. I called the school counselor and I said, look, I've been incarcerated all these years. I want my daughter to know that school is important and I want to be involved. What can I do? And I would have never taken those actions if I had not taken this program. Because I would have been too much shame, too much guilt. I thought for sure the school would know, and the teachers, and that they'd be judging my daughter for me and her mother's actions, because in my case, her mom was in prison too. And so it was profound for me. I don't have that shame or guilt walking into the school anymore. So
Yeah.
I'm very thankful.
It is, most parents will say, that is the scariest place to go when you've been incarcerated, is into the schools. So, yeah, it's pretty powerful.
The funny thing is that the school didn't even, the counselor said, we had no idea.
Yeah. So the counselor he's talking about, her name is Lisa Meyer. You might know Lisa. She's been in building for a long time. Anyway, so Lisa and Barry both serve on the VIP committee, which is another aspect that was formed because of the need. So now he knows, him and Lisa know each other very well.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, and then the last one, we talk about self-care and ongoing support. So we could have somebody come in, again from the community, to do coping, activities or breathing, or, so that one we kind of leave fluid depending on what the group really needs and wants. So we have added the component of ACEs to the group. So they understand adverse childhood experiences, and that's kind of rough, to kind of swallow, and how, what does this mean for me? So we'll talk a lot about ACEs in this as well. And what I've done actually is, ACEs is complicated. Most of you know about ACEs. So what I've done is I do their ACEs score.
Please?
I'm sorry?
Would you define that for
I'm-
most
yes.
of us that may not know that?
I would be glad to, thank you. Adverse childhood experiences. And does that sound familiar? Okay. Yeah, and so I'll do the survey at the beginning and just do an intro to it, and that way that, kind of that shock value, if you're a 9 or 10, that shock value is now kind of, then we say, okay, we're gonna keep going with this, and I'm available for questions, yada yada. But then at the end, we will bring it around to the ACEs, probably on the last night.
Those are the sponsors. People willing to donate their time and energy to bring food to the group, and they typically will sit down, and someone in the group will have came up with a question that they're going to ask them. you'd be surprised at some of the questions that group members come up with for the restaurant. Sometimes it's a restaurant owner, sometimes it's just an employee, but you'd be surprised at the responses that we have got or I've been involved in.
Yeah, this is a really powerful piece because there's a couple of accidental discoveries in doing this. When the group first started, I knew for sure I wanted food because that speaks to me. And I knew that we could do, Little Caesar's $5 thing. And I thought, no, I want to see if we can do this different. And so literally, I hate soliciting. It's like my least. I'll public speak any day with soliciting. But I did. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to see. And so I spent one day downtown and walked around the restaurants, didn't know anybody. And by the end of the day, we had 8 restaurants committed. And what they do in sponsoring is, like Barry said, they bring the meal to us. Where there's a lot of communication happening because they're busy and I don't want to weigh them down. So we picked Tuesday night specifically because the restaurant sets their lightest night of the week. So the chef will bring the meal to us. And like he alluded to, every group member has ownership in it. So at the first night we sign them up. Week 3, I would like for you to be here 15 minutes early. This is the restaurant. When they arrive, I want you to help them set the food out. We eat off of real dishes because if somebody's going to make that for us, we're not going to do paper. So at the end, they also have a sign-up sheet for doing dishes. So and facilitators too, we all just, take turns and do it together. And so the chefs, like he said, they'll stick around for just a few minutes and they'll be asked the question of the night, which is, again, the group members get to come up with that. And what we discovered a couple of things. Number one, we eat really good stuff. Really good stuff. So it's very, very generous. The other component was a lot of chefs have had a history of incarceration or at the very least addiction or, some trials of their own. The other component was that a lot of people that have been in jail or incarcerated, oftentimes the first area of employment will be in the restaurant industry. So those were just a couple of components that kind of hit home for us. And it's changed a little bit. A couple of our sponsors have changed, but for the most part, they've been with us from the beginning. So we appreciate it. This is kind of dim, but that's what you were talking about. This is Morningstar Retirement Home. And I thought, that's odd, a retirement facility, bringing us. But the reality is when they're cooking, they don't get to use a lot of, because for the elderly population, you have to do a little bit more bland. So they saw this as an opportunity like, heck yeah. So they brought us this amazing, this was Valentine's Day actually. So it was amazing treatment that night. Okay, current research. So I think we wouldn't be here if we didn't have heart investment in this, correct? There also has to be research in it and to know that this is actually working. So right now we're kind of looking at taking the evaluation tools and seeing, is this making a significant difference? So that's kind of on my shoulders to follow up with the research. So I want you to know that this is research based. I did not finish the program in Bozeman, but I'm in Billings in the psychology program. And so we are looking at the instruments that we're using and looking at the research around it. But what I can tell you is, in looking at different parenting programs across the nation, what they really are understanding is that relationship is key to lowering recidivism. It's not the magic bullet, it's not the only answer, but the level of contact that they have with their family and their children and the health of that contact really has a huge impact on recidivism. Not a surprise to you, I'm guessing. So what that means is now that when you have research, the funding tends to come along with it, and so you're still seeing more emotion-focused programs within facilities. And so that's the good news.
Children of incarcerated parents have a higher risk of antisocial behavior, more than risk associated with mental health or drug use. Antisocial behaviors are reported as the most powerful predictor of adult adjustment problems. However, risk factors do not predicate a child's destiny. I am not going to be a statistic just because my mom was incarcerated. And that's actually from a girl here from Billings.
Yeah, Asia's just turning 21, I think. And I knew Asia when she was this high. She was that was one of the families that was at the prison all those years ago. Their mom did, and Shelley's very much aware that we share her story because she usually comes with us. So it's with her absolute permission. But Shelley did, she calls it 6 tours, 6 times in and out, and so she'll be the first to say she missed the majority of her children's lives. She had a baby who was when she was incarcerated, actually had twins when she was incarcerated. But Shelley has been out now for almost 10 years, and she is amazing. She's amazing, and what her and her kids, not all the kids, but a couple of the kids want to be part of this. So Asia does come, she's on the committee, Shelley's on the committee. And Shelley will say it's not struggle-free. She struggles all the time, but she's doing the right thing, she's working hard. And it's interesting the timing of this presentation because tonight, KTVQ, I don't know if you've seen the advertisements for it, but they're doing a special report on this very issue. So it'll be tonight and tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, you will see Shelley's story through her son Landon. And Landon is 15 now. So they interviewed me, but they also interviewed Landon. And so I don't know how she's going to do it, but I'm really looking forward to how she tells their story. So you'll know a little bit more about Shelley and her family. But anyway, yeah, Asia's like, you know what, I don't want to be a statistic. Just because somebody says I, am going to be. So I'll just throw this up here, and when I was doing theories about, the kind of loss that comes with incarceration, this one really jumped out at me and it made sense. When there's separation, divorce we know is hard on children. This is even harder because of the stigma for one, and a lot of times the degree of secrecy. So sometimes caregivers want to be protective so they don't say very much. Sometimes the school officials may know, sometimes the kids don't want them to know, so there's all kinds of, can we talk about this, can we not talk about this? So it's very confusing. And then to know that your parent was using drugs or was violent or whatever, can you imagine the conflict there? And then also if you go to see that parent, why can't they just come out the door with me? What's this all about? So you can see that the loss is so confusing, and that's, I think, what makes it even more difficult on children. Sometimes even when caregivers think that children know, not necessarily. So this is an example.
My parental grandmother thinks he wasn't bad, but he was bad. She says, don't worry and stuff like that, but my mom says he's going to come out in a few weeks. Deep in my heart, I miss him, but outside of my heart, I don't. He's mean, 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 and my brother protects my mom when he was in the protecting position. Well, at least we get a picture of him. I really want to show you him. This is an actual child statement. I would like to see my mom more, but my auntie don't like me seeing her. She's clean, but I don't know why my auntie don't want me seeing her.
So very much conflicting, as you can see. This is a drawing by one of the young girls that comes to our VIP committee sometimes, and she comes to the group on their night. Very, very powerful, and that's her with her grandma going to see mom, who was incarcerated and has been out for about 5 years. So.
3 children in every classroom that we know of will have an incarcerated parent at some point during the school year. That's 1 in 7 in every classroom.